Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the ruins of the ancient battlefield. The land was scarred, still haunted by the echoes of a war fought centuries ago, where two legendary warriors had fallen. Buried beneath the ground, their weapons, an ancient sword and shield, had been lost to time, waiting for the one true warrior who would rise to reclaim them. It was said that the chosen hero would wield their power to protect the realm from a new and greater evil. Aiden stood at the edge of the battlefield, his heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and fear. The stories his father had told him as a child came rushing back. He had heard about the sword and shield, how they had once been the key to saving the realm from destruction, and how only the worthy could wield them. Now, standing there as a young knight, those stories felt more like prophecy than legend. The sky was a canvas of orange and pink, a stark contrast to the cold, war-torn ground beneath Aiden's feet. His village had been attacked just days ago, the enemy forces growing stronger with each passing raid. He had sworn to protect his people, but deep inside, he knew that without the legendary weapons, he might not stand a chance. That he shifted his sword on his back and tightened the straps on his armor. The weight of his quest felt heavier than the steel he carried. With a deep breath, Aiden set out across the battlefield, his boots crunching against the debris of long-forgotten wars. The wind whispered through the ruins, as though urging him onward. The path was treacherous. Aiden's journey had taken him through dense forests and across vast plains, but nothing compared to the desolation of the battlefield. It was as if the land itself had absorbed the anguish of the countless lives lost here, leaving it barren and lifeless. Yet, as Aiden pressed forward, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. It wasn't long before he saw movement in the distance, a figure cloaked in shadows, standing on a ridge above him. Aiden's hand instinctively moved to the hilt of his sword, ready to defend himself if necessary. The figure, tall and imposing, made no move to attack, but instead began descending toward him with slow, deliberate steps. As the figure came closer, Aiden could make out more details. The stranger was a woman, her face obscured by a hood. She carried a blade on her back, but it was unlike any sword Aiden had seen before. Its hilt glowed faintly, as if imbued with a power far beyond the reach of ordinary steel. "Who are you?" Aiden called out, his voice echoing across the silent wasteland. The woman stopped a few paces away from him and pulled back her hood, revealing a face that was both young and weathered. Her dark eyes gleamed with a wisdom that belied her age. "I could ask the same of you," she replied, her voice steady and calm. "But I already know. You're here for the sword and shield, aren't you?" Aiden hesitated. "I am. My village is under attack. I've come to find the weapons and use them to defend my people." The woman studied him for a moment, then nodded as if she had already known his answer. "I am Leora," she said. "And I, too, seek the sword and shield. But you should know, they do not simply belong to whoever finds them first." Aiden frowned, unsure of her meaning. "What do you mean?" "The sword and shield are bound by ancient magic. They will only reveal themselves to those who are truly worthy. And even then, not just anyone can wield their power. The choice of which to take is as important as finding them in the first place." Aiden felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard the stories, but hearing Leora speak of the weapons as if she knew them personally added a weight to his quest that he hadn't anticipated. Still, he had no choice but to press forward. "Then I'll prove myself worthy," Aiden said, his resolve hardening. "I have no other choice." Leora nodded again, her expression unreadable. "Very well. But know this, the path ahead is fraught with danger. You will not face it alone, if you allow me to join you. Aiden eyed her warily, unsure of her true intentions. But he knew that having a companion, especially one as skilled as she appeared to be, could mean the difference between life and death. With a slight nod, he accepted her offer, and together, they continued their journey. The sun had long since set by the time they reached the outskirts of the battlefield. A pale moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the land. As they pressed forward, Aiden began to notice strange markings on the ground, symbols etched into the earth, glowing faintly in the moonlight. He pointed them out to Leora, who examined them closely. "These are wards," she said. "Magical barriers meant to keep intruders away." "We're getting close." Aiden's heart raced. The weight of his quest grew heavier with each step, but he couldn't turn back now. The sword and shield were within reach, and with them, the power to save his village. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the air. Aiden and Leora spun around, weapons drawn, just as a massive creature lunged at them from the shadows. Its body was covered in thick, matted fur, and its eyes glowed with an unnatural light. It was unlike anything Aiden had ever seen, a monster born of magic and darkness. Leora moved first, her blade slicing through the air with deadly precision. The creature roared in pain as her sword struck its side, but it wasn't enough to bring it down. Aiden charged forward, his own sword flashing in the moonlight as he drove it into the beast's flank. The battle was fierce and brutal, but together, they managed to overpower the creature. As it collapsed to the ground, Aiden stood panting, his chest heaving with exertion. "That was no ordinary beast," he said, wiping the sweat from his brow. Leora nodded, her gaze fixed on the fallen creature. "No. It was sent to guard the relics. We're very close now." With renewed determination, they pressed on. The path led them deeper into the heart of the battlefield, where the air grew colder and the ground beneath their feet felt strange, as if the earth itself was shifting beneath them. Finally, they reached a massive stone archway, half buried in the ground. The symbols etched into its surface glowed faintly, the same markings they had seen earlier. Beyond the archway lay the ruins of an ancient temple, its walls crumbling and overgrown with vines. A faint, eerie light flickered from within. "This is it," Leora said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The sword and shield are inside." Aiden felt a surge of adrenaline. He had come so far, faced so many dangers, and now the weapons were within reach. But as he stepped toward the archway, Leora held out a hand, stopping him. "Wait," she said, her expression serious. "Before we enter, you need to understand something. Once you find the sword and shield, you'll have to make a choice. You cannot take both. You'll need to decide whether to wield the sword's power or the shield's protection." Aiden frowned. "Why can't I take both?" "Because the two are bound by magic," Leora explained. "They represent two different paths, one of destruction, and one of defense. You must choose the path you're willing to follow." Aiden hesitated. He had always assumed that the sword and shield were meant to be used together, that they were two halves of the same whole. But now, faced with the reality of the choice, he felt a weight settle in his chest. "I don't know which to choose," he admitted. Leora placed a hand on his shoulder. "The choice isn't just about the weapons. It's about who you are and what you're willing to sacrifice. You'll know when the time comes." With that, they stepped through the archway and into the ruins. Aiden and Leora moved cautiously through the ruins, the air thick with an unnatural chill. The faint light that flickered within the temple seemed to pulse in rhythm with Aiden's heartbeat, drawing him forward as if an invisible force was guiding his steps. He could feel the weight of destiny pressing on him, his pulse quickening with every step. As they ventured deeper into the temple, the corridor walls closed in, lined with the same glowing runes that had marked their path. The symbols seemed to hum softly, almost like whispers, urging them onward. Aiden's grip tightened on his sword, his knuckles white. Every instinct screamed that they were not alone, that something, someone, was watching them from the shadows. Leora walked beside him, silent and focused, her eyes scanning every corner of the ancient structure. The tension between them was palpable, though not from mistrust. There was a shared understanding that whatever lay ahead would demand everything from them both. Neither spoke as they passed beneath an archway into a massive chamber. The room was vast, the ceiling towering high above them, shrouded in darkness. In the center of the room stood a stone pedestal, upon which rested two objects bathed in an ethereal glow, the sword and the shield. Aiden's breath caught in his throat. This was it. The legendary weapons he had been seeking, the key to saving his homeland. They gleamed as if freshly forged, despite the centuries that had passed since they had last seen battle. The sword, long and slender, its blade shimmering with a strange light, exuded power. The shield, large and ornate, radiated a quiet strength, its surface reflecting the flickering light of the chamber. Aiden stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the pull of the sword, its promise of unstoppable power calling to him. Yet, at the same time, the shield beckoned with a quieter, steadier allure, offering protection and the strength to stand against any foe. He hesitated, his mind racing. Leora's words echoed in his thoughts, "You must choose the path you're willing to follow." He looked to her for guidance, but Leora remained silent, her expression unreadable. As he stood there, torn between the two relics, a sudden noise broke the silence, a low, menacing growl from the shadows. Aiden whirled around, his sword drawn, just as several dark figures emerged from the far side of the chamber. Clad in tattered armor, their eyes glowed with a sickly green light. They moved with an unnatural speed, weapons raised, their movements more akin to the dead than the living. Leora reacted instantly, her blade flashing as she leapt into action. Aiden followed suit, engaging the nearest attacker with a powerful strike. The clash of steel against steel echoed through the chamber as the battle erupted around them. Despite the number of enemies, Aiden felt the balance shift in their favor as he fought alongside Leora. Her skill with a blade was unmatched, her strikes precise and deadly. Yet even as they cut through the enemies, more seemed to take their place, emerging from the shadows like wraiths. Aiden gritted his teeth, his muscles burning from the effort of each swing. They couldn't keep this up forever. He glanced toward the pedestal where the sword and shield lay, realizing that the choice could no longer wait. They needed an edge. Now, with a final blow, Aiden dispatched the last of the immediate attackers and turned back to the pedestal. The sword and shield gleamed before him, both promising salvation in different forms. His hand hovered over the sword, the allure of its raw power almost overwhelming. But then his gaze shifted to the shield, its surface steady, unwavering. His thoughts raced. The sword could end this quickly, give him the power to destroy his enemies. But the shield, it represented something more. The power to protect, to defend not just himself but those who could not defend themselves. He thought of his village, of the people depending on him, and suddenly the choice became clear. Without another moment's hesitation, Aiden reached for the shield. The moment his hand touched its surface, a surge of energy coursed through him, filling him with a strength he had never known. It was not the wild, destructive power he had feared. It was something deeper, a strength rooted in resilience and courage. The shield felt right, as though it had been waiting for him all along. Aiden turned to face the remaining enemies. They hesitated, as if sensing the shift in power. Leora, seeing the shield in his hand, gave a brief nod of approval before charging forward once more. With renewed vigor, they fought side by side, Aiden using the shield to deflect blow after blow, each strike against it absorbed as though the shield itself was drawing strength from the attacks. The tide of battle turned swiftly. The enemies, though fierce, were no match for the combined strength of Aiden and Leora. With a final, resounding blow, Leora dispatched the last of the creatures, and silence fell over the chamber once more. Aiden stood, chest heaving, the shield still glowing faintly in his grip. His thoughts raced, the enormity of what had just happened beginning to settle in. He had chosen the shield. He had chosen to protect. Leora approached, her expression softer now, though still guarded. "You made the right choice," she said quietly, her eyes briefly flicking to the pedestal where the sword remained untouched. Aiden nodded, though doubt still gnawed at the edges of his mind. "Why didn't you tell me this would happen?" he asked, his voice strained. "I couldn't," Leora replied. "This was your journey, your decision. The sword would have given you power, yes, but power corrupts. The shield, though, it's for those who understand that strength isn't about destruction, but about what you're willing to protect." Aiden swallowed hard, her words sinking in. He looked down at the shield, its surface still gleaming with the faint, ancient magic that pulsed within it. He had never been drawn to defense before. He had always been the one to charge into battle, sword swinging. But now, with the shield in hand, he felt a sense of clarity, of purpose. Before he could respond, a rumble echoed through the chamber. The ground beneath them trembled, and cracks began to form in the stone walls. The magic that had long held the temple together was beginning to unravel. "We need to go," Leora said sharply, her gaze darting around the crumbling chamber. Aiden nodded, and together they sprinted toward the exit. The ground shook violently as they ran, debris falling from the ceiling and the walls crumbling around them. They barely made it out before the entire structure collapsed behind them, sealing the ancient relics away once more. Outside, the night air was cool and still. Aiden stood with Leora at the edge of the battlefield, catching his breath as he looked back at the ruins. The temple was gone, buried beneath the earth, but the shield remained firmly in his grasp. "Now what?" he asked, his voice quiet. Leora glanced at him, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Now, you go home. Your village needs you. And with that shield, you'll be able to protect them." Aiden nodded, the weight of the shield in his hand feeling lighter now. He looked out over the horizon, toward the distant hills where his village lay. The journey ahead was still long, but this time, he was ready. Leora gave him a final nod before turning to leave. Aiden watched as she disappeared into the shadows, her own path taking her far from his. But he knew, deep down, that their paths would cross again. With renewed determination, Aiden began his journey back home, the shield strapped firmly to his arm. The legend of the sword and shield was not just a story anymore, it was his story, and he would carry its lessons with him for the rest of his life. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: Aiden was no longer just a knight in search of power. He was a protector, and with the shield by his side, he knew he could face whatever darkness lay ahead.